I want to welcome today to Pro Mindset Coach Thom McDaniels. Coach, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Happy to be with you.
Okay, Coach, so why don't you share for the audience your relationship to the game of football?
I grew up in Orrville, Ohio, and Orrville is famous for being hometown of Bobby Knight and Smucker's Jelly. But it was a small town in northeast Ohio, close-knit community, a diverse community, and very much into the high school sports. The social lives of the people in that town sort of revolved around high school sports depending upon the season of the year. So, I was a grade school kid and a middle school kid that grew up, wanting to be an Orrville Red Rider, and had an undistinguished career myself. I was very average at best in every way as an athlete, but I fell in love with the game early, and I think I had a good mind for the game, and I think that even as a player, I was more interested in the coaching part than I was the playing part.
Coach, what position did you play in high school?
I was a quarterback and a defensive back, and graduated from high school, went to Clarion State University. It's in western Pennsylvania. I'd had 6 knee surgeries, so that sort of speaks to my athletic ability. I wasn't able to avoid, as many hits as I wanted to, perhaps, but did not have a college career, but knew I wanted to coach. And upon graduation from Clarion State University in 1972, I came back to Orrville as an assistant coach, and I was an unpaid volunteer. Their staff was intact. Most of those people were my coaches when I was there. And it wasn't until they either moved in administration or retired that I could move up. So I functioned was an assistant for 10 years, at Orrville, and then at a place in more central Ohio called Mansfield, Ohio, and then back to Orrville, and then was hired at Canton, McKinley as an assistant coach for my 9th and 10 years as an assistant, and became a head coach there at Canton, McKinley in 1982. And for the people listening, our home field was the Hall of Fame game field. The Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, happened to be built next door to it. So they played the Hall of Fame game there and still do, but at that time it was really a high school stadium. But it was big-time high school football, as big as high school football can get in Ohio. We were in the large school division. We were a public school, a city, urban school setting. And I think I was fit for that kind of environment. But we had a great run there, and following the 1997 season, we were preseason USA Today, the number 1 ranked team, back when they did that. I don't even know if they still do that. And we ran the table, and we're undefeated, and we're state and national champions, state champions on the field and the mythical national champions, according to USA Today.
Okay, Coach, let me interject real
yeah.
quick. Okay, so how many years did you coach high school football as the head coach?
26 of the 40 years that I spent, I was a head coach.
Okay, so you coached high school football for 40 years. You were a head coach for 26. You happened to be the mythical national champion one season. Let's go back down memory lane and go through those 6 years of being a head coach.
Okay.
What was the biggest impact you made on the kids? And what has kind of recycled back to you as these guys have gone off to college, become, gotten married, gotten jobs, and become adults? What has been the most rewarding thing about being a head football coach at the high school level?
Well, I understood pretty early in my head coaching experience that it was important where I was coaching. It was important for us to win games. It was important. Football mattered. And it was important to beat our arch rival, Massillon. We played for over 130 years. But at the same time, I understood that as the most public representative of the school system, more people were going to watch our football team play than any other group associated with the school system. They were going to see our marching band and our high school football team. It was important, for the kids to understand that how we behaved was as important as how we played. So we were going to try to be the team that won every game but we wanted to also be the team that represented, my superintendent, my board of education, and the mayor of the city, my principal in the school district. We wanted to represent them the right way. And that wasn't always true of the teams at that school at Canton McKinley. They were always fast, they were always physical, but they weren't always as disciplined as they needed to be, and they didn't always represent, on the field, what their superiors and the important people in the community wanted us to represent. So that became a core concept of ours. Yeah, we want to play like crazy, we want to win games, but we also want to represent this city and the school system the right way. And we were able to get the kids to buy into that. And I never knew whether we modified their behavior temporarily. I hoped it would be permanent, but, there were very, very few occasions in my head coaching experience where we ever did anything that was an embarrassment, to the program, to the system, to the city. And consequently, I think that there's a large portion of our kids who became adults and they weren't competing anymore, but how they behaved was as important as anything that they did. And so we've got a lot of kids that I think took that core concept and let it become permanent. We always hoped it would be, but I know a lot of them now is dads and parents and husbands, and they're not all coaching, obviously, but there's a whole bunch of them that are successful, and I think that had a lot to do with it.
Okay, Coach. Thom, let's talk about the culture that you developed as a head coach. And
Yep.
Back then, they might not even have called it culture. Now they call it culture. Before John Wooden came out with his pyramid of success, no one really realized that you could frame your culture.
Yep.
Okay, and Bill Snyder did the same thing at Kansas State, and I could list 50 coaches that have done it. What was your culture?
It's multifaceted, and I'll try to represent it, in a few phrases as best I can. But it was intentional, even though we didn't have a name for it. It was intentional, and now the culture word is commonplace. But one of the things that we believed in and we wanted our players to understand and accept was that nothing about football was unimportant. When players start to decide that this about football is important and this about football is unimportant, that's when we have issues. And so if it was important enough for us to teach, then it was important enough for them to take seriously and to attempt, to do the way that we had coached it to do. We didn't want players, deciding that, you're a gunner on a punt team, but that's not important, because I'd rather be the tailback or the quarterback or starting linebacker. So we sold our kids on that and sold them on the whole concept of about, team football. We had a whole program for that. I spoke at the National Convention one year about that. But we sold the concept of team. We wanted them to believe that nothing about football was unimportant. There are a lot of easy things in our game, and we wanted to do all the easy things well. Stance is an easy thing, and we wanted to be in a stance that we coached. If you're a defender and you're reading a key, that's an easy thing. It takes no special ability to read a key, but we wanted to read a key. Alignment, splits, all of those things that we all sort of referred to as fundamentals and basics. We wanted to be great at them because most of them have nothing to do with ability. And so we take our talented kids and we get them to do all those basic fundamental things really well, and it's amazing how many games you can win when you do the easy things well. So that was a concept that we sold, and I was at two different high schools, very similar, but we had remarkable success both places. But we sold the same blueprint. We never wanted to be scheme rich and execution poor. And there's a whole lot of that going on, I think, in high school football today. We have more schemes than we can be really good at. So, less is more, from our standpoint. But we never wanted to be, coach's office scheme rich, but, practice field and game field execution poor. That's not who we wanted to be. And so we learned how to do that. We didn't right away. but we learn how to become that. That's a concept that we believed in and that we shared and that we sold with our kids. We never believed that there was such a thing as too much individual practice. Historically, we have individual periods and group periods and team periods, but with the kids that we coached in those inner city environments, there was no such thing as too much individual. There is such a thing as too much group and too much team. But we weren't going to be that kind of coaching staff, and we were not going to be that kind of team. We were going to devote a ton of time to players' individual skills and positions and techniques and fundamentals. And obviously we were going to group up at some point and we were going to team up at some point, but we were never going to cheat individual time. We just didn't believe in that. We were a team that believed that scrutinizing and studying our previous game was way more important than studying the next opponent. We played Friday and we devote 4 hours on Saturday morning to grading our film and evaluating our performance and scrutinizing the way we played, sharing the film and the information with the kids, because, in a 42-6 win, there were still mistakes that were made. And we knew that if we didn't correct those mistakes, we couldn't beat the best people who still remained on our schedule. So, that was a core concept of who we are and what we wanted to do. Some of us can't win it for all of us. We were not a coaching staff that celebrated our best players. We demanded the most from the best players, and we made that obvious. We weren't going to pamper our best players. We weren't going to look the other way if they made a mistake. We weren't going to pat them on the butt because we were afraid to coach them. We were going to be unafraid to coach our best players, and we wanted everybody to understand that it was going to take all of us. If you have a scout team role, and I was a career scout team guy, I was going to take that role seriously, and we got our kids to buy into that. Those are some of the things, that I believed then and that I still believe today. We were never going to embrace success. It was always a journey and never a destination. And I know some of these things, are phrases and concepts, that I learned since I started coaching in 72. And some of them I learned from guys like John Wooden and Bill Walsh and Bo Schembechler. And some of them I learned from guys, names you wouldn't know or recognize. But I think that, being that kid in high school who was more interested in coaching than playing, I look for things, and I'm an avid reader, and I have an enormous library of books and videos, and that's just who I was. So, if the devil could teach me something about being a better coach, I was going to go ahead and learn from the devil.
Okay, Coach, so let me regurgitate back to you what I heard. Okay, and I heard a couple different things. One is that, and so many coaches fall into this trap. They take the best dude on the team and they treat him special.
Yep.
And it ruins the whole organization, the whole program.
Correct.
And it's because you just created a double standard.
That's
and
correct.
So, right? And so the players can't trust a coach that has a double standard. And the coach created the double standard by playing favoritism to the most outstanding blessed players. Okay. Right. The second thing that you said was you don't do things by accident. You're not winging practice.
No.
Everything you're doing has a purpose.
Absolutely.
And the thing that you're doing is you're basically, it's almost like building a house. You start with the foundation and then you build the walls and then everything else follows from there. You start with ND period, teaching the fundamentals so that the players can be excellent at what they do. So when you put them together as a team, now you can make music.
Yes.
Especially in offense.
Yeah. There's no offensive play that doesn't require at its best for all 11 guys to get their job done. And we know that doesn't happen every play, but that should be the goal every play. And that connects to that first thing that I mentioned about nothing about football as being unimportant. It was part of our responsibility as coaches to get the guys on the backside of a power play to the right to understand that, even though you're not at the point of attack, your assignment is key and critical to the success of the play. So, we didn't want players making decisions about what was or wasn't important. We achieved that, to a measure. That also, I think, is a journey and never a destination. you can't say it one time and have it, be achieved. It's a daily reminder of all the things that you believe.
Obviously, if you guys were the mythical national champion, you had excellent players and you had a lot of success in your winning. Let's talk about both of those, but let's start out with, how do you teach young men how to win? And before you answer, I just want to put a little sidebar in here. So many kids, and this applies at the pro level too, have talent, can make plays, they're outstanding players, but they still don't know how to win. And other players do know how to win. How do you teach a kid how to win, and what does that mean?
Winning is, as far as I'm concerned, is a cumulative result of what a whole bunch of people are supposed to do. And it's pretty obvious that you can't win a game by yourself. It's a team game, the consummate team game. We involve the most people at one time on a play than any other sport that I can think of. I'm not sure if I can think of a team sport where we've got 12 or more people at one time participating on offense or defense or in the outcome. And so it's a collaborative effort. And while you're attempting to do your job and complete your assignment to the best of your ability, that alone is not enough. And so I think we focused on getting our kids to understand not only their responsibility, but to understand the big picture and how their responsibility and their assignment connected to the other 10 in the huddle, that got the best result. We discouraged selfishness. We rewarded unselfishness. We punished selfishness. And I'm not talking about anything physical, but we were never going to reward that. I think kids who come to us in our programs, with the ability to run and the willingness to hit, but they didn't all come being unselfish. There's a whole bunch of them that were superstars, in the lower levels. And they had to learn how to function with all those kids who weren't superstars, because that's what it took to win.
Okay, let's jump to quarterback.
Yep.
You played quarterback. You coached quarterbacks.
Yep.
And if you look at all levels, especially the NFL, but really it's all levels, most offenses go as far as their quarterback takes them.
Yep.
Because most offenses require their quarterbacks to be really good. What are the physical traits and what are the mental traits that you look for the best performing quarterbacks?
And let me preface it by saying that we don't have cookie cutters, right, as high school coaches. And our quarterbacks, year to year, they're not always the same guy. Now, if you happen to have a sophomore who wins the starting job and you're going to have him function as a starter, barring injury, for 3 years, that's a blessing, because for at least those 3 years, and I'm a guy that believes too that the offense succeeds if the quarterback succeeds. And so what we chose to do offensively had an awful lot to do with the ability of the starting quarterback at that particular time. We were not going to ask kids to do what they couldn't do, but if we had an option guy, or we had a guy that was a better runner than thrower, then what we did offensively was going to be a little different while he functioned in that starting capacity. And it might change because the next guy might have been a better thrower, a better decision maker, a better under guy, a better gun guy. So the individual traits that they brought to the position, that affected to some extent what we chose to do. But what we were absolutely going to do is we were going to take the quarterback and whatever he did well, and we were going to tailor what we did to him. And if he succeeded, then we thought the offense had a chance to succeed. So I was a big believer in toughness. In quarterbacks don't have to dish out an awful lot of punishment, but they have to be able to tolerate it. They have to be, tough physically, but they got to be tough mentally, because an awful lot of times, those guys get a lot of credit, maybe more than they deserve when things go right, but they get a lot of blame when things don't go well. We coach toughness. We coached a ton of basic, fundamentals that I see lacking in the game today.
What are those, Coach? What are those?
Well, I'm a quarterback coach, and I sort of coach him from the ground up. I'm a big footwork guy, and I believe in coaching drops and I believe in getting to launch points expeditiously. I coach the kid from head to toe and toe to head, but I believe that footwork has an awful lot to do with a quarterback's success in throwing the ball. I think the angle of departure, if you're under center, run game is a critical concept. If we're running stretch, that angle of departure for the quarterback is going to be different than if it's power or ISO or midline dive. I coached an awful lot about vision and believe that, when we get our kids to understand that they got to put their eyes where they need to be, the eyes, gather information and gathering information helps me make a decision. We were a team that created triangles with receivers, and we tried to read triangles and distribute the ball accordingly based on coverage. I didn't overcoach grip because every kid's hand size is not the same. There were certain points about the grip that I coached, but if they could spin the ball, I didn't try to change the grip that they had. I didn't try to overcoach throwing mechanics. I tried to correct critical flaws, but being on balance and ending on balance and something called the conservation of angular momentum. It has to do with rotation of hips and shoulders in order to get velocity and distance. I didn't overcoach that, but tried to break it down to basic phrases that, if I mentioned a phrase, that replaced a paragraph and they understood what that meant. I still train quarterbacks even though I'm retired. And I work with everything from junior high kids up to kids that are entering their freshman year of college. And I think that quarterbacks who I coach and quarterbacks who played for me, I think that when you see them, they demonstrate a belief in the things that really good quarterbacks coach. Now, I said that there are some basics and fundamentals that I see lacking today. I was a guy that believed in front hand pressure on the ball until the moment of the throw. But a lot on Saturdays and even on Sundays that we see quarterbacks running around behind the line of scrimmage with the ball in one hand. I think playing a position begins with great ball security, and we have better ball security when we have two hands on the ball than when we have one hand on the ball. I never tolerated that. And I don't know that they coach that anymore because it's bad ball security to have the ball in your bare hand running around with it at your side, but we see it all the time. And I think that's an invitation for a turnover, and our first responsibility is to take care of the ball. I don't know that, why I coach feet and footwork so much is I think that, I was a timing throw guy, and we had timing throw concepts, 1, 2, 3 step, ball gone. I did a quick 5-step drop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ball gone, no hitch, no read, no delay. And then we had a 5-step drop where we might have read a progression, we might have hitched once or twice in the pocket before the release of the ball. We tried to have play action off our best run actions, and we tried to be a great screen team because when you're good at screening the ball in high school, that can be a very successful, critical part of your success in your game.
No doubt about it. Okay, Thom, who's the best player that you've coached that either went on to the pros or went on to college and did really well? And then when you name who it is, describe for the audience what attributes did that player have physically and mentally to put him in that position? Okay.
I had a wide receiver at Warren Harding by the name of Mario Manningham. Mario played for Michigan and had a great career. And then he had it wasn't a greater professional career, but he had a good professional career. He was with the Giants, I think for a contract, his rookie contract, and then with the second-year contract, he took an offer from the 49ers and was with them for a contract and then returned to the Giants. So he was a 3-contract guy, maybe 10 or 12 years in the league, but he was the best high school receiver that I ever coached. And again, he had an equally great college career, playing at Michigan, and a less spectacular career playing as a pro. I had a defensive back by the name of Mike Doss that played at Ohio State. He was a state champion for us. He was a national champion with the Buckeyes. and he was injured the year the Colts won the Super Bowl when Peyton was there. He was injured and couldn't play, but he started for the Colts, and his professional career was interrupted because of an injury. And I had a running back at Warren Harding by the name of Maurice Clarett, who starred for us. He was Mr. Football in the state of Ohio. He started for Ohio State as a freshman during their national championship year, with Jim Tressel. But is sometimes the case, he came under the influence of some people that weren't good for him. He strayed from a path that would have led to more continued success at Ohio State and probably the NFL. And so it was a very short career at Ohio State and virtually no career at all in the NFL, because of a misstep at one point in his life. The good news about Maurice now is he speaks nationally, coast to coast, to corporations and college football teams, professional football teams, and basically he's got a great story about don't do what I did, to prolong your career and to be successful, all of life and not just during a short period of a career. Mike Dals is a successful businessman in surgical sales right now. And Mario Manningham is retired and lives, in North Canton, Ohio. He's got a son that people are going to be talking about someday. But those were three very different kids. All happened to be minority kids. Mario came from a family with a great mom and an amazing grandpa. His grandpa was the key father figure in his life, and his grandpa gave Mario over to me and fully supported how I approach coaching. Fully supported the fact that I wasn't going to baby Mario or pamper him, that I was going to expect more from him, and fought for me as a head football coach, in the black community, whether he was coming out of church or going into the barber shop, he was going to be a defender of Thom McDaniels because he knew that Thom McDaniels, had something that was going to be best for Mario Manningham. Maurice Clarett was a legendary kid, is a youth player, middle school player, and I inherited him when he was a junior when I went to Warren Harding, which is in northeastern Ohio. And we had an early confrontation as a first-year head coach his junior year in the year 2000. We had pregame meals, and he skipped the pregame meal. And when I confronted him about it, he told me that he wasn't hungry. And I said, fine, but it's not your decision to miss a meal. If you're not hungry, then you come with your teammates and you just don't eat the meal. But you don't get to make that decision. And he didn't like the fact that I confronted him with that, and he reacted the wrong way. So I didn't play him that night, and we lost 13-7.
Wow.
And I didn't play him the next week, and we won. And this was like the third game of the year, my first year at Warren Harding in my 17th year of head coaching. But when presented with an opportunity to make an example, and I never looked for one of those, but I also learned to never pass that up. There was never a need to discipline, Maurice Clarett again, ever, and there was never a need to discipline almost all the other players who witnessed that on that team, because we were going to expect the most from the best. But that was a meaningful time for him in his life. He had never experienced that before. He was the tail that wagged the dog, and he was the great player that people pampered and babied, and we believed in coaching that guy hard and having high expectations. And he and I are close to this day. I had him come and speak to my old high school team not too many years ago because I felt like those kids needed to hear his success to failure to success story. And he delivered in magnificent fashion. So those are three really good players that I had that came from tough circumstances, but accepted hard coaching. I think got better as a result, maybe forever, maybe for a time, and maybe they had to come back. And many of the things that I was espousing, to Maurice, when he went astray, he's now coaching and espousing to corporate America and college teams and professional teams all across the country. So I think it all came back, to a good ending.
No doubt about it. I know of all three of those guys. I've seen them play in college. I saw them play in the pros. Maurice was obviously entangled in an interesting draft eligibility issue back in the day, and was made an example. And obviously, like you said, he's turned that pain into glory for other people by, sharing with them, don't do what I do. That's pretty cool. So very familiar with those guys. What I'd like to do is kind of shift gears, Coach. You've got share with everybody your family, and you've got two sons right now that are coaching in the NFL.
Yep.
One has been a former head coach and coached Tom Brady for years. So why don't you share, in deference to however many kids you have, how many kids do you have?
I have three sons, and my oldest son was a cross-country kid, and he works for the county in which I live. And Josh, you're more familiar with because of his time with the Patriots and his short time as the Denver Bronco head coach. And Ben has been in both the NFL and major Division I college football, and he's just accepted a position, with the Houston Texans. Both kids played for me. Both kids were quarterbacks. They had elevated football IQs, I think, because they've been in and around the locker room since they were 4 or 5 years old. The biggest treat that they had back when we were using 16 millimeter projectors, I'd bring the projector home and I'd watch film at home and I'd let them run the button. So they date back to 16 millimeter projectors, and I know that they learned a lot just being around my assistant coaches. They learned a lot. They knew drills and they knew footwork, and they knew things, before we got to the point where we were coaching them formally as junior high or middle school or freshman kids. But neither was a very big kid. Josh was, probably 5'9", 145, when he was starting quarterback for us. He was also a really good kicker. He held a lot of the McKinley career kicking records until they've been surpassed. Benjamin was a little taller, but a little leaner. But both, Josh took us deep into the playoffs during his time here. He was part of the 100th McKinley Massillon game. It was featured in a 6 or 7 page article in Sports Illustrated. That game was played in 1994, and it was the 100th anniversary of that rivalry that dated back to 1894. I believe it's the oldest high school rivalry in the country. But both Massillon and McKinley are known nationally as high school powers. We lost the 100th game because he missed an extra point in overtime, and we lost 42-41. And then we played that same team, Massillon, in the Rubber Bowl in front of 30,000 people, and we won 27, to 20. But those are historic things, in our region of the country. Those are remarkable. And Benjamin won 2 national championships in 97, or state championships. We won in 97 and we won in 98. He was a 3-year starter. We were 37-3, during his 3 years. We won so many playoff games, it was like he had a redshirt year. He played 40 games in 3 years. But Josh went to John Carroll University, and them as the school that's given rise and given birth to so many really, really successful coaches, whether they're college coaches, and there's a whole bunch of them that are in the NFL in some capacity. And Bent went to Kent State and played for Glenn Mason. Josh GA'd for Nick Saban at Michigan State, and Ben GA'd for Glenn Mason at Minnesota. And so, they took what they learned from me and went on to other people to learn other things and learn way more than I knew. The last message they got from me is, if they tell you to make coffee, you do it better than anybody's ever done it before. And if they tell you to go pick up a recruit at the airport, you do that better than anybody's ever done it before. Don't make decisions about what there isn't important. The task that you're assigned right now, that's the most important task you have until you get assigned the next one. I sort of fostered that belief. And then Nick required that, and so did Glenn Mason. So, they went to work for people who sort of thought the same way. I knew those guys personally, and Josh had one offer as a GA, and it was at Michigan State with Nick, and Ben had one offer as a GA, and it was at Minnesota with Glenn Mason. But, they then parlayed that into, the careers that they've had since then.
Well, let's talk about the NFL for a moment.
Yep.
Everybody puts the NFL up on a pedestal for obvious reasons. There's a lot of money. It's the Super Bowl. It's the apex of the sport. What are some of the things that are still the same that people don't even realize are the same? Because I see from looking at all different levels, I feel like they're all the same. I mean, one gets a paycheck on Tuesday, and in college you don't, in high school you don't, but I see them mostly as the same. What is your perspective of having, two sons that coach in the NFL? What do you see as the differences?
Well, I agree with you to some extent. I think they're the same to some extent. Certainly not every. The hash marks aren't the same. The width of the goalposts aren't the same. The length of the field and the width of the field, that's the same. Once, Josh got into the, into major college, with Nick at Michigan State and Ben at Minnesota, and once they got into the NFL, I've been a guy who attended bowl practice my entire coaching career. I'd go where they'd let me attend, and I'd watch and I'd study and I'd learn. And I made spring visits every year. I'd make visits to two places, and it was usually they did something that I wanted to learn how to do better, or they did something that fit what we were doing at my school. And so, I had a desire to learn and a curiosity. So when they got to Michigan State, Minnesota, the New England Patriots, I had opportunities to learn, in the NFL that I hadn't had before. And what I learned was that there are versions of the game of football, and the pro version is not the same as college, and the college version is not the same as high school. And what I learned is that whether it was a fundamental or a concept or a play, that the Patriots used, I had to do the high school version of that play. I think pro players, are more mature than college and high school guys. They have technologies that they are able to use to teach that I never had in high school, or maybe only had at the end of my career. They're grown men, and some of them are still becoming men when they enter the league, but they have capacities to learn that may surpass the capacities of those inner city kids, and high school kids that I coached. Some of them came from inner city programs and grew into, being pros. Most of them had talents and abilities. I just named the three best guys I ever had, and none of them was a great professional. They were just good professionals. So the talent level at the NFL is the best of the best. Whether we've heard of them or not, if they make that 53-man roster and they end up starting and they end up being successful, or even if they're not successful, they might be successful individually. But the talent level was amazing in the NFL, and I coached at places who had great high school football. The detail in the NFL surpasses, to some extent, I can't necessarily put a number on it, high detail, that say a Nick Saban or an Urban Meyer requires where they coach. Maybe not by much, but to some extent. And the detail that Alabama and Ohio State and the great college programs require, that surpasses to some extent what we required. Now, we tried to match their level, but it ended up being a high school version of Alabama or Ohio State or New England. And that's the key, I think, is I think we need to learn from the people who teach it and coach it best. But then I think we have to take it home and figure out what the high school version of that is, because in most instances, our teams are never going to be as talented, from the first guy to the last guy as their first guy to their last guy. And that was the key for me, to take what I learned from Bill or Nick or Urban and do our version of it. Because the exact version, that didn't fit our template. And so I learned to do that. And Coach Belichick was gracious about me being available, especially in the spring and at OTAs and maybe the preseason practices, not so much in season. I never bothered to be at in-season practices, didn't want to interfere, but Josh would ask, "Hey, Bill, my dad's in town. Do you mind if he comes to practice?" And at one point, Bill told him, he said, "You don't need to ask anymore. If your dad's in town, he's welcome here anytime, anywhere." So it got to be that way. But I think the best thing I learned was, okay, this is what they do and this is how they do it. Okay, now what's my version of it, so that we can come as close to duplicating that as possible. And the most remarkable difference, I talked about some of the similarities and some of the differences, but the most remarkable difference in attending a pro practice, for my very first time, it was not the size or the speed of the players. It was the volume of communication that took place. Let's say that the Patriots were in a huddle. From the huddle call that the rookie quarterbacks struggle making, to the management at the line of scrimmage that Tommy demonstrated, to the counter call that Teddy Bruschi made on defense before the volume of not just how much, but how loud and how it was communicated. If Teddy made a call, it was echoed by 10 other guys, so that he knew that they heard what I said. And Bill would, Tommy get to the line of scrimmage, and Bill would have Teddy in their training now. They're not preparing for an opponent. Change it, move it. He'd move the front, he'd move the backers, he'd change the secondary, and that would result in Tommy, having to make an alert, all within, at that point, the 35 or 40 seconds they had to get the ball set. That blew me away. That's the biggest difference from NFL coaching, the way Bill did it and the way Josh learned it, to what we did in high school.
Well, it was like a chess match in the NFL.
But
that's what made Tom Brady, or that's what made Peyton Manning so phenomenal, was he always got the last move. And then as soon as he made his adjustment, he got the ball.
Yes.
Right? So let's talk about Tom Brady for a minute. And how many Super Bowl rings does Josh have?
Josh has been to 9 and won 6.
Okay. So your son has been a coach in 6 winning Super Bowls. And
right.
Certainly, he's tied at the hip with Tom Brady and Tom's success over the years. And of course, he jumped over to Denver for a minute and then came back. But what has Tom Brady taught your son? Because a lot of times we learn from players that he might not even know, but the fact that he was associated and got the opportunity to coach Tom Brady. What was special about Tom?
Yeah, the most important thing that I think Josh learned from Tom was that he wanted to be coached hard. Sometimes we have to impose that on our best players. I know we do in high school. We have to impose hard coaching on those pampered kids that we got out of youth football or middle school. Right? Correct?
Right. Yes.
Well, Tommy made it clear early in their relationship that you don't have to impose that on me. I want that. I need that. And that fit into the way that Josh was raised in football, because that was what he was used to as a player, and it was what he was used to working for Nick Saban. I promise you, it was what he was used to working for Bill Belichick, and so it was that was an immediate revelation, but it didn't necessarily mean that it was easy, because I'm going to coach, arguably the GOAT, and I'm what, 3 years older than he is, or 2 years older than he is,
right.
and I've got to coach him hard every day, and I've got to try to make him better every day. There was nothing that Tommy ever wanted about waste of time. That's not who he was, and it's not fortunately who Josh was, or Bill, or Nick. Those guys maximize every second, every minute, and Tommy was, he wasn't into any waste of time, and neither was Josh. So that was copacetic, But imagine having to impose that on a guy. That's tough. Okay. Well, it's even more tough, more difficult, I think, to meet that standard on a daily basis with a guy who's as accomplished as Tommy is. And yet, somehow he did that. Their relationship was strong, lasting, and permanent. They'll forever, not be tied at the hip, visibly, but they're close. Both professionally and personally. Their kids, are about the same ages. They shared being fathers, together. They shared being husbands together. And it's a really rare and special relationship that they had. And it wasn't always fun, and that's another thing that I learned, and I ended up taking back and teaching to my coaches and to my players. Being excellent is never easy and not always fun, but that's the way it is. That's the deal. It's not easy, and it's not always fun. And so there, in any coaching relationship, like any relationship, that a husband has with a wife, they're not all in 100% agreement. Everything isn't always copacetic. Everybody has good days and bad days, but their relationship was so strong, and it remains that way, that they got through the days that were difficult. They got through the days, where together they maybe didn't reach consensus about whatever. I can't even be specific about what that was. But that to me is the measure of the depth and quality of their relationship, that it survived all of that to this day.
That's fantastic. Coach, let's jump to two of the coaches that your family is intertwined with that are arguably the two best coaches of all time. They're certainly two of the best coaches during lifetime, in Nick Saban and Bill Belichick. And Bill Belichick right. and Nick Saban are friends because they work together.
Yeah.
So when you look at it from a little bit of an insider's viewpoint, but let's just pretend you're not, but what little you know, what separates those two guys, and just start with Belichick first, what separates him from everybody else on the planet that coaches football?
Their personalities are not identical. So it isn't personality. And let me mention this about Bill, because this is a little known thing, I think, about Bill. Josh believes that Bill is the best listener he's ever known in his life. And I don't know if you've heard that before, but Bill is credited with a lot of things, but I don't know if he gets enough credit for being the best listener that my son has ever known. I wanted it to be me. Maybe
right.
I wanted Josh to be the best listener to me, but Bill is open to other concepts and thoughts and opinions, and he's willing to listen. But he is so gifted and so knowledgeable. Your presentation better be remarkable. It can't be a great idea with a bad presentation. Or it can't be a great presentation, but a concept or a thought that's not sound or fundamental or steeped in basics. But that's just a separate thing about Bill. I think it's when I say nothing about football is unimportant, I believe that Nick Saban and Bill Belichick live that. There's nothing about the job description that is unimportant. What they're doing at the moment in time is the most important part of the job. But I don't think they rank order stuff. I think that they do the best job of that of any of the people that I've ever met or known. Nick is credited with being, the guy that can deliver that home visit recruiting conversation that is unmatched. Bill is he doesn't have to recruit, but I think that Bill does as good a job of getting players prepared to succeed on game days. And I know Nick does the same thing. Very early in the week, and this is something that I learned from them. Bill can take an opponent, and the players play Sunday. They come in for, film review and injury check on Monday. They're off Tuesdays, but they come in Wednesday, and in just a matter of a few short phrases, Bill can identify things that they have to do really well in order to win. And they're not the same things week to week because the opponent changes week to week. So it's not about, taking last week's plan and using it this week. Bill does and we're talking offense, defense, and special teams. He's able to identify. He's able to communicate, with Josh and to Josh. Okay, these are the things that offensively we need to be great at in order to be successful. And so Bill probably does that as well as. And I don't know a whole lot of other head coaches in the league. I know some, but I don't know them that well to say that they do that the same way. And Nick he's extremely demanding of his coaches, demanding of players. I think Nick still coaches, corners, whether full-time or part-time, but he's still actively involved in coaching. But there's no tolerance for lack of effort. There's no tolerance for lack of preparation. There's no tolerance for lack of detail. And all of that lets you be your best self. That lets, your unit be its best unit in that particular moment, in that particular situation. That's who they are, and that's how I view them as being similar.
Okay, so you've had a son that's been a head coach in the NFL, and we both know that the NFL is cutthroat, and expectations are usually unrealistic. What will Josh do differently, and what has he learned from that experience that's going to help him the next time he becomes a head coach?
When it didn't go well for him in Denver, and at Bill's advice, Bill told him you need to go home and see your mom and dad, and so Josh got on a plane and he came to see his mom and dad to make sure that we were okay, and we were okay. But the advice that I gave to Josh, and I was only following, what I came to think is successful for myself. You need to be, you need to take a Word document or an Excel document, and you need to list the things that you would absolutely do differently the next time around. And you need to start that list before you get on the plane to fly to Canton, Ohio. And it needs to be, there's no end to that list, because, as you review what you did and how you did it, whether it was fully your responsibility or not, you need to list the things that you would do differently, if given a second opportunity to be a head coach. So he has a list, and it's a working list, and it's there's no end to that. And at the same time, you need to discern, and you need to study and scrutinize what you did, and you need to make a list of the things that you would do the same. Okay.
No doubt.
And so he has done that. Now, there's some of those things on that list that he has shared with me because we've discussed it, but there are probably just as many that didn't need to be discussed, with me. But he's looking forward to the next opportunity, the next great opportunity, if and when it presents itself. But he also knows he's got a great job, maybe the best job in the NFL.
Yeah, he's got a fantastic job, and
yeah,
there's a time that's going to come where he may step right in to being the head coach up there. So he doesn't need to be jumping around and chasing a job.
We don't know that. That's not a given, and it's not expected to be. We don't know that.
That is true too. You don't know. And ownerships change, lots of different things change, and sometimes organizations want to go with the past successes. Sometimes you want to turn the page and start fresh with whole new philosophy, all new people. So there's nothing that you can ever plan on. But I think the thing that's really cool for you, being a lifetime coach at the high school level and having the opportunity to coach some guys that went on to the pros and several guys that went on to play in college, is to have your own kids, coaching at the, the elite level. So what does it feel like for you as a dad? Now, you're not a coach now. You're a father. And you're watching your kids do what they get to do, and Josh in particular in a Super Bowl, coaching a Super Bowl. How cool is that for you?
That's really cool. And it's just role reversal. Remember I told you that they came to practice when they were 4 or 5? Well, It's just role reversal. I'm just 72, but I'm the 4 or 5-year-old that gets to go to practice and watch them practice, or gets to go to Super Bowls and watch them coach. It's just role reversal. Our ages are just slightly different. By the way, he's on his way to pick me up to take me to lunch right now.
Okay. Well, I won't hold you up for that. Coach, is there anything I didn't ask you that you would like to add, and then I'll just ask you a question and you could answer it, or are you good?
There's probably 1,000 things, but I can't wrap my 72-year-old mind around what those 1,000 would be right off the cuff. It's better when you ask me a pointed question, because then I can give you a pointed answer.
That's fair. I do have one last question.
Sure.
Okay, Coach. So you're 72. You've coached football for over 40 years. You've passed on the legacy to two of your sons that are coaching in the NFL. What is the most important? What are the components of a mindset that you see that, if there's a kid out there listening that aspires to play in the pros, or there's a kid in college that's playing that wants to make it to the pros, or, anybody in any situation that wants to get to the next level compared to where they're at? Could be a guy that's in the pros and wants to become a starter because right now he's on the bench. What are the attributes and the components of a mindset, in your opinion, that it takes to get to the highest level and to play at that level?
Well, I think you got to understand that there are many rungs to that ladder, and when you're climbing a ladder, every rung matters. And whether it's sleep or whether it's diet, which are way more important now than they used to be 40 years ago. We didn't know to even coach that stuff. Or, in-season strength training, out-of-season strength training, films, whatever it is, you need to do that at a championship level. You need to study at a championship level. You need to eat and sleep at a championship level. You need to train. You need to be around championship people. If the championship and remarkable success is your goal, then you have to expect that from yourself in every way. And I don't know that I can state it more simply, but at the same time, I think that is the profound, simple truth.
Okay, so let me rephrase what I just heard you say. If you look at mindset as a ladder, every step matters. You can't skip them. You can't skip two.
Every rung
right?
of the...
So whether it's your recovery, whether it's your preparation, whether it's your eating habits, whether it's your sleep habits, whether it's your pay attention to the playbook, taking mental reps, and all those things, you got to do them all.
Yep.
And that's what you got to do. And then how you got to do them is you have to be excellent. You have to do them in a level that's, commensurate with winning championships.
Yeah, I think demanding excellence from yourself prepares you to meet great expectation from other people. You can't go from not expecting it from yourself to suddenly figuring out how to meet it when other people demand it. So it's all about self-discipline in every facet of your life. If remarkable excellence is what you want.
Amen, brother. Coach, thank you so much for being on Pro Mindset today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope you did.
I did. Remarkable. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate the invite.
All right, Coach. Well, have fun at lunch with your son.
I will.
Best of luck, and hopefully our paths cross down the road.
I would look forward to that. You stay safe.
Thank you, Coach. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.